And so this idea of a mystic here, I've talked about this for a while now, but a mystic is a person who's actually had an experience of God in some way or another. It has become alive inside of them, either through the spiritual practice they were engaged in, either through a crisis moment in their lives, a divine revelation, through just a accumulation of being open and willing to allow Spirit to reveal itself through us. And so that's how we become mystics here. And this awakening is about shifting our orientation, shifting our idea of what it means. Oftentimes when we read about these great mystics throughout history, and we think, they talk about this one moment where Spirit just hit them hard and they were awakened. Yeah, it doesn't happen that way. It's actually a lot of practices. It's everything that led up to that moment that they've done in consciousness, the work that they've done, the trials that they've been through, the ideas that have awakened inside of them. All of that leads up to that spectacular moment when Spirit hits them with the 2x4 and they are now awakened to the world. It's recognizing that it's not that one singular event, but it is what is happening through us all the time. As Spirit moves itself into form, it can only do so when it moves through us. And so this is what this awakening is about. It's awakening to that illumined life that is within us. It's not leaving behind our humanness for this idea that we become holier than thou, but it's about allowing that illumined Spirit to have a place to work in the world. So in that chapter of what it does, Ernest Holmes teaches us that Spirit, acting through what he calls the law, which is the principles, the things that are true all the time, produces some kind of results. And he says that the science of mind is not merely philosophical, it's demonstrative. In other words, we are here to prove these principles actually work in our lives. We're here to prove that we are that place where Spirit shows up. That Spirit is moving itself through us into expression all of the time. And that's what we're here to prove. We're here to prove that we are the peace that we've been called to today. We're here to prove that to ourselves and to the world around us. So what begins to happen is that we begin to consciously co-create with Spirit. Spirit is looking for that avenue. It's looking for that place where it can move into expression. And if we are resistant to it, it doesn't really have a place to operate. But as we start to cooperate with Spirit, where we actually kind of get out of our own way a little bit, and we can allow Spirit to move through us in different ways. And so when Spirit is moving through us and acting according to the law, to those principles, then it produces results. Not just symbolic results, not abstract results, but actual lived, tangible results in our lives. It's when things really begin to shift and open up for us. And so what it does is reveal to us all of these spiritual awareness, ways that we're changing in our spiritual awareness. It reveals it through our thinking, through our feelings, through our choices, and through the experience we actually have of life itself. Things begin to shift in our life when we open up to that influx of Spirit moving through us. In the opening paragraph of that chapter, Ernest says this. He says, "The divine mind is infinite and contains all knowledge and wisdom. But before it can reveal its secrets, it must have an outlet. This outlet we shall then be compelled to supply." We are the place where God shows up. The place on which we stand is holy ground because that's where God is showing up in this moment through each and every one of us. And so our job is to allow it to move through us. As Emerson said in one of his wonderful essays called Self-Reliance, we are to get our bloated nothingness out of the way. I love that phrase, get our bloated nothingness out of the way, so that we can actually be that place where Spirit moves into expression. And so the question then becomes, what happens when I consciously co-create with Spirit? What begins to shift? This is where illumination begins. This is where we become lit up with Spirit. It's when we actually begin to consciously work with it and see what changes in our lives. And this doesn't happen as much outside of us as it does inside of us. We will begin to see outside effects, but it's what's happening inside of us is where the power is. So once we understand this and once we begin to get ourselves out of the way a little bit, we can then begin to ask the question, what am I illuminating into this law? In other words, what is it that I want to shine my light on? Is it the peace that Katie sang about? Is it that love that's powerful? Is it becoming a place where others feel safe around us? What is being illuminated through us as we become this place where God shows up? So awakening then is not about believing in something new. It is about allowing consciousness to operate differently in us. We don't have to find another theory. We don't have to find another religion. We have to get ourselves out of the way to allow Spirit to operate differently in us than it has ever done before. So this is a shift in a belief from just simply believing something to awakening to that truth within us. And so it takes it out of our mental faculties. Is anybody else here really good about thinking things to death? I'm sure it's just me. I can think something and think something and think something, and I'm still like, what is wrong here? Why am I not experiencing it? Because I haven't brought it into my body. I haven't done what we call embodied it. I haven't brought it into that cellular level. I am understanding it at an intellectual level, and that's well and good. But it's got to go deeper. It's got to dive into us, and it's got to become alive inside of us. Many, many people in this world believe in God, but very few people are awake to the God that's living within them. Yes. It is alive inside of us, and it is constantly looking for an outlet. Ernest Holmes reminds us in this chapter that the law always responds, but not to our words. I can say words over and over and over again, but if there's no belief there, then there's not going to be a lot of room for it to respond. And so law responds to our state of consciousness, to the level of belief that we have. As the master teacher said, it is done unto us as we believe. So what are we believing about this? Are we believing that this is the truth? Or is it something that we believe that in theory, and it may happen for some people, but yeah, I'm not sure it's going to make its way to me. The mystic begins to understand this again at that intuitive level. The mystic has embodied this. They have taken it from an intellectual understanding of it to a conscious realization within their body. It is alive inside of them. Awakening is that movement from unconsciousness to conscious participation in the creative process. It's moving from reacting to life as we see it around us to co-creating with life, to allowing it to become more powerful than any effect that we see around us. Illumination here comes as clarity. It becomes as an understanding. And so again, awakening is a movement from unconscious creation to conscious participation. The first week of the month, I gave you what we call the Declaration of Principles, and I want to bring a couple of those back in. These are the principles that Ernest Holmes put out in 1927 that were the foundations of our belief. And so the principle number 4 says, we believe that heaven is within us and that we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. We don't believe in a heaven up there in the clouds somewhere, and if we're really, really good, God will let us go to it. We believe it is a state of consciousness that we create within ourselves. And our experience of it is based on what we call cause and effect. And so how I think about things and my response to things determines the degree to which I'm experiencing heaven or, in converse, hell, either one. We believe that we experience those to the degree that we become conscious of them. And so if my life is filled in this idea that everything is happening to me, I am in this state of consciousness where I'm just blowing with the wind. Something's happening to me here and something's happening to me there, and I just keep going back and forth between that. But if I can stand in that place where I know that I am consciously co-creating with life, then I stop being that pendulum that is being blown by the wind. And I stand firm in my truth. And then my experience is less hell and more heaven. Because I'm not being pushed at from all sides all around me all the time. The second declaration of principle I want to bring in is number 7 here. We believe in the direct revelation of truth through our intuitive and spiritual nature, and that anyone may become a revealer of truth who lives in close contact with the indwelling God. You know, we've talked about mystics for a while now, and it sometimes feels like that's just those high and holy people that have done a ton of work and gotten to that place. But the fact is we are all mystics in one degree or another. We have all had some experience of God in some way or another. Otherwise, we would not have been called here today. We would not have walked through the doors if we weren't having that experience of God seeking it to reveal itself through us. And so always we have this opportunity to listen deeply through our intuitive and spiritual nature. We can only discern that when we get quiet enough to listen to it. We can only discern that when we use our spiritual practices to allow us to stop our chattering mind and open up to what Spirit wants to reveal through us. And that happens in all kinds of ways. If you are familiar with our visioning process, we often say that we hear things, but actually we are sensing them, smelling them, sometimes tasting them, sometimes hearing them, sometimes seeing them. It happens through all of our senses. We intuit the impress of Spirit through our senses. Me, I like to call it a download, but that's the computer geek in me, so it just gets downloaded right in. And so again, this awakening is that movement from unconscious creation to just being out there being blown around the wind to conscious participation in life, co-creating with life. Illumination can be described as seeing what has always been there all along. All of a sudden, it's been revealed. We've been awakened to it. Have you ever been driving around and all of a sudden you're like, I've been on this road, but I don't recognize anything around me? It was hidden from us because of our consciousness being so rapidly moving through from one thing to another that we're not able to see some of the things that are around us. The same thing happens when we're working with Spirit. Because our active mind is going all the time, it's difficult for us to hear that voice of the divine. It's difficult for us to get that download or to feel that impress of Spirit as it's revealing itself to us. It is constantly looking for an outlet. It is constantly looking for a place to operate in our lives. There's a fabulous story by Elizabeth Gilbert in one of her books where she's gotten this friend who is another author, and they're meeting for lunch one day. And Elizabeth Gilbert has this story that's been trying to write itself through her all the time. And so she starts to tell her friend this story, and as she's describing it, it's about a middle-aged woman who goes to the Amazon to work for a construction company and falls in love with her boss. And her friend across the table just gets this look on her face like, what in the world here is happening? and pulls out her notebook. Now, they lived on opposite ends of the country. Her friend pulls out a notebook where there is a story about this middle-aged woman who goes to the Amazon to work for a construction company. Spirit couldn't get Elizabeth Gilbert to write it fast enough, so it downloaded it to her friend. That's what happens. If we're not receptive to it, it's going to look for another outlet. It's going to look for a place where it can show up and do the work that it needs to do. Spirit would like it to be you, but it doesn't really care. It's going to find a place. So understanding the law, the principle, that's the metaphysics. That's what we talk about with that idea of studying the law, studying those principles, all those declarations of principles that I gave you. Then last week we talked about this creative process with our science of mind symbol. If you weren't here those 2 weeks, there are extra handouts in the lobby that tell about both of those things. That's understanding the metaphysics of it. But this idea of living from an inner illumination, that's mystical. That's where consciousness really has a place to operate in us. So the metaphysician learns how these laws work, how these principles work, and they learn how to apply them, just like any good scientist would. But the mystic learns how to listen. The mystic learns how to be quiet so that spirit has a place to work. In that same chapter, Ernest says, we listen in order that we may hear what Spirit is saying to us. We listen to hear Spirit's voice. Joel Goldsmith, another mystic contemporary with Ernest Holmes, carries this teaching a little bit further inward. He taught that illumination does not come from mental effort. It does not come from just repeating affirmations or studying spiritual principles. It doesn't even come from spiritual willpower. It comes through our inner stillness. It comes when we actually can allow Spirit to reveal itself through us. When we stop trying to make it work in our lives and we begin to allow it to work, a huge shift happens for us. Goldsmith calls this the interior awakening. And he says that we need to be willing to be used by God, be willing to be used by truth, be willing to be an instrument through which truth reveals itself. So a listening attitude, a willing attitude, a surrender of all of my mental machinations that want to make themselves work in my life, and open up a way from which the imprisoned splendor may emerge. It's in there. It's looking for the outlet. The mystic awakens when that inner knowing, that inner truth, becomes so tangible in us that the only thing it can do is show itself forth. When we stop being so dependent on the things that are around us and more dependent on the things that are within us, then life begins to really shift for us. Now, this doesn't remove every single challenge that we ever face, but it can transform our relationship with the challenge. So when we are facing with a challenge and we say something like, why is this happening to me? The mystic begins to shift that around. What is here for me to know? What is here for me to grow from? What is here for me to understand that I haven't understood before? Can you feel the difference in that? In the first one, why is this happening to me? I am a victim to it. I have no control. I'm just out there blowing with the wind. But in the other one, there's a place for Spirit to operate, a place for Spirit to reveal itself through us as we ask these different questions. It doesn't erase all of the shadows in our lives, but it gives us a way of dealing with it a little bit differently. It brings light into the shadow. And you know, shadows disappear when you shine the light. This awakening helps us loosen our fear. It helps us remove some of that tight grip that fear can have on us. It helps us get away from reacting to something as our only way of responding. It allows us to step back and to see things differently. Life begins to feel more like it's guided than some random occurrence. And life begins to take on a purpose we may not have known before. Awakening is not about escaping all of the problems in our lives. Problems come and go. It's about engaging with life with a different clarity, with a different purpose. So here are some ways that we can actually begin to, hit too far, awakening as a way of living, to actually begin to put this into practice here. The first one is that pause. Pause before reacting. Now this can be pause before reacting to bad things. It can also, in my experience, be a pause before reacting to those things I'm really excited about. I have a tendency to just say yes way too quickly when I'm excited about something. Pause before reacting. Pause before responding. I once heard somebody say that when they were asked to do something, they had learned to tell the people, "Let me think about that, I'll get back to you." What a beautiful way to give themselves that pause. Let me think about that, and I'll get back to you. Another thing we can do is we can choose to trust over trying to control. It's a way of being faced with a challenge, and instead of trying to fix it right away or to make it better or to make myself feel comfortable in the situation, I begin to open up and say, what's here for me to know? How am I going to shift through this? And the last one here is to begin to listen instead of defend. Instead of immediately going to a reaction to something that's been said to me, I listen deeper. I begin to use phrases like, can you tell me more about that? Instead of taking my reaction, my response, and having that be the first thing that comes out of my mouth. Tell me a little bit more about that. Help me understand. When we begin to listen instead of being defensive, then we begin to shift our responses to the situations around us. And we actually become a place for other people to have a different experience in the situation too. This awakened life that we're talking about here is a lot less about certainty, about the guaranteed experience that we think we should have, and more about attuning or aligning with what is coming through for us. We have lots of wonderful spiritual practices that will help us move through that. When you came in today, you were given a copy of the blog post that I wrote for this week. And on the back of it is a little bit about one of our best technologies ever. I've heard many people say that this is the best kept secret in science of mind. We call it a spiritual mind treatment. It's also sometimes referred to as affirmative prayer, or just prayer. It is a powerful way to begin to shift our experience of the world, our experience of things that are happening to us, the things that we have to deal with. We have classes that teach you exactly how to do spiritual mind treatments. And there's a little formula to it. You'll see there are some steps listed on the paper. or it's a 5-step treatment. In some versions of Science of Mind, it's a 7-step treatment. I was taught with the 5 steps, so can't tell you exactly what the 7 are. But the first one begins with acknowledging spirit. We call that recognition. And it's all about God. This is our opportunity to build within us that experience of what God is. You often hear our practitioners using absolutely beautiful statements when they are talking about what God is to them. But it's all about God and recognition. Then our second step is, if God is all of this and how wonderful it is, because I know that God created everything, it must have created me. So the second step is I unify myself with God. So all of those wonderful things about God that I said in that recognition, I need to remind myself that I am them too. If I say that God is unconditional love, I need to remind myself that unconditional love resides right within me. If God is perfect peace, then I need to remind myself that I am perfect peace. And so when you're treating for yourself, you just unify yourself. When we're treating for somebody else, like we'll be doing here in a few moments, we also unify the other person. I usually do this with a statement, something like, and since I know this is true for me, I know that it's true for everyone, for we are all one with Spirit. Something along those lines, bringing everybody in to that conscious awareness. The third step of treatment is when we deal with whatever we're praying for. And we deal with it in truth. We deal with it by reminding ourselves of principles, reminding ourselves of the fundamental nature of how all of this works, reminding ourselves of what is true for us in this situation. We call this one realization, where we are realizing the truth. And after we're done with all that, then we do what the mystics call the greatest prayer ever, and that's we give thanks. Gratitude is one of the greatest things you can ever do in any of your spiritual practices, and so we give thanks. Now, when we give thanks, we're not giving thanks for a whole laundry list of things that we're thankful for. We're giving thanks for the action and the activity of the divine moving through us. We're giving thanks that we are connected with Spirit. We're giving thanks for knowing this truth and allowing it to work within us. And then the last stage, which often gets overlooked, but is absolutely powerful, because the last stage is all about our faith in it, all about our belief. The last stage is release it. Let it go. If all of this is true, if what I've said about God is true, and what I know about myself is true, and these spiritual principles are true, and I am grateful for it, there is nothing left for me to do but let it go. Into the action and the activity of the law, where it always says yes. And we let it go, and we let it be. Now, this is a fabulous, powerful technology to help you change things in your lives. I have proven it over and over and over again in my own life, that when I am stuck in a situation, I can turn to spiritual mind treatment and the situation gets rectified. But there's a few things that are absolutely necessary for spiritual mind treatment to work. And the first one is, you got to ask for it. You actually have to ask for treatment. You have to step out and say, please, would you pray for me for this? The prayer becomes active the moment you ask, not the moment anybody else begins to pray for you. It is the asking that activates the prayer. The asking signifies to Spirit that there is a willingness, there is an openness, there is a channel through which it can move into expression. And so that asking is absolutely vital. And so we have lots of ways you can ask for prayer here. You can do it on our website. There's a box in the hallway. Normally after service we would have prayer in the prayer room, but we're going to do something a little different today. So there are ways that you can ask for prayer. You can send an email request to any of the practitioners or me, and you will get a prayer response. You have to ask for prayer. And that involves a lot of things. Like we sometimes have to get out of our own head to do that. Sometimes we have all this judgment about, oh, I shouldn't do that. I should be able to fix this myself. Why should I do that? In my experience, the best thing I can do is to reach out and ask for prayer. Yes. I have a list of people, my prayer posse. And all I do is I text, no truth for me. But me reaching out, I don't even have to tell them what the situation is. No truth for me. And I know that this wonderful group of people, most of them are fellow ministers, are going to pray for me at that moment. I don't have to tell them what the situation is, because the situation doesn't matter. It's the truth that matters. And so me taking that willing step of reaching out and asking for prayer, Spirit rushes in and fills that void. And life is wonderful and miraculous when we ask for prayer. So we're going to do what we call a prayer wall. I'm going to invite our spiritual practitioners to come forward. They're going to stand up here in a nice line. Your job is to make a line right down the aisle. And when you come to the next practitioner that is available, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to tell them what your name is, even if you think they know it. Because trust me, we get up here and we get in the moment and it's like, yeah, Spirit's there. I can't remember who you are. I mean, it's not a personal thing. It's just the way it happens to work. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to come up and say, hi, my name is Laura. And then you're going to ask for prayer. Now, we've simplified it a little bit by giving you some words that you can use here to request prayer. So, for instance, if you are having some financial difficulties, you might want to request prayer for abundance. Or perhaps you're having some trouble figuring out what it is, and you'd ask for prayer for clarity. Maybe you're looking for, we're getting close to Valentine's Day. Maybe you're looking for a new love in your life. You might want to ask for love or joy or vitality or wholeness or wisdom. I mean, all of those things fit with new loves. So find the thing that works for you in each one of these situations. So you come up and you say, walk up here and you stand in front of Clay T and you say, hi, my name is Laura and I would like a prayer for love. And Clay T is going to do the realization stage of the treatment. And then when you're done, I want you to go around the outside edge back to your seats, please, because we're going to have a line in the middle. So I'm going to start the treatment off. I'm going to do the recognition and the unification. And then I'll step down here, too, to join the line. And you guys will come up here. I'll say, after I finish the unification, I'll say, form a line. And you come up here and ask for prayer. And one of our beloved practitioners up here who have spent a long time learning how to do this and really embodying this idea will be happy to give you a spiritual mind treatment based on your request. Then after everybody's done, I'm going to come back up and I'm going to give thanks and I'm going to let it go. All right? Got that? Okay. Beautiful. Justin's going to be doodling behind us as he does so beautifully all the time. All right, so there's your words up here. Practitioners are ready. Take in a deep breath. And so as we come together in this consciousness of one, I know that there is only this one power and presence, this one divine, creative love intelligence that has brought forth everything into existence. I know this one as the isness and the allness and the fullness of all life. I know it is the beginning and the end and everything in between. I know this divine presence as that unconditional love, perfect peace, clarity, wisdom, intelligence. I know it is continuously moving itself forth into expression. It is omnipresent, always here. It is omnipotent, all-powerful. And it is omniscient, all-knowing. And because I know there is only one, I know that I am one with it. I know the power and the presence of the divine resides right at the heart of my being. I know this is the truth of who I am, that I am filled with that unconditional love, that perfect peace, that divine wisdom and clarity. It is operating in me, through me, and as me right here and right now. And because I know this is true for me, I know this is true for each and every one of us, for we are all a perfect emanation of this powerful love intelligence. I know that each one of us is the place where God shows up. And so knowing this truth, I invite you to come forward and form a line in the center of the aisle, ready to receive your realization. So right now, I invite anyone who did not step forward to claim their word of power here, simply speak it in their mind. For I know that in the willingness to speak the word aloud, prayer is answered. And how grateful I am to be in this consciousness of one, to feel the power and the presence of the divine moving itself into expression through each and every prayer that has been uttered here today. I know that each one is fully answered, fully complete, and fully done. And so I release this word into the law, into the creative mind that always says yes, that knows no lack or limitation, and is always unfolding itself for the highest and greatest good of all. I let it go, and together we say, and so it is.